The board is absolutely soaked. And the GM was just like shaking his head, pausing the clock, and he's like, you can't do that. And then the GM's like, you have to sit on your side of the board. Please, you have to sit on your side of the board. Threatening the rook. I'm also threatening to take this rook. This is one of the most upset, annoyed, angry, sad games I've ever played. This is round 4 of US Amateur Team East, and I have won the last 3 games, but this game, so many things happened in it. I couldn't believe it. So I'm going to take you through the game, take you through the journey, and coming into this round, our team was 2 points out of 3. So we knew we were going to play some high-rated people, and I'm on board 2. I'm playing against 1900, and board 1, our board 1 is playing a Grandmaster, 2500 Grandmaster. So it's a tough matchup for the board 1, and we're slightly outrated on the other boards too. Okay, my opponent starts out with d4, and we play the Queen's Gambit Decline. And not only that, we play the Exchange variation. And you remember from my round 2, we had these exact same moves happened in my round 2 as well. But in my round 2, though, my opponent played Queen c2. But in this game, my opponent played e3. And I played h6. And after my opponent moved back, I played Bishop e7. And it was in this position where I wrote my move down, and I slowly moved my hand over back to the board, so I could either like fold my hands like this. I was just moving my hand back towards my body, and I proceed to knock over the water everywhere. I mean, the water, just like I have a cup of water, and it just falls over and goes all over the board. The whole board is covered. It is soaked. The board is absolutely soaked. It didn't get on notation sheets. It didn't get on the clock, but every piece on the board got wet. Every piece. And so, I'm absolutely flustered by this. And so I paused the clock, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And like, the look of upsetness, of annoyance, and disgust from my opponents, because like a 12-year-old, was immense. And the GM was just like shaking his head. And I was like, I'm pausing the clock. I think my opponent said, like, why are you pausing? Like he was asking the GM, like, why is he pausing the clock or something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm pausing the clock because I'm obstructing the board. That was actually what I said. Like I said, like, I just spilled water everywhere. Like, I'm obstructing the board. I'm going to pause the clock and grab some paper towels. And so I just, and I probably should have called it TD first. And say, I just spilled water over everything. That's what I should have done. But I was kind of flustered in the moment, and I just like paused the clock and ran to the bathroom to get paper towels. And when I came back, the TDs are talking about what they should do. They need to get a new board. We need to move elsewhere because the water got everywhere. It was like a whole 10-minute thing. And so they just put a bunch of paper towels down and then put a new board on top of that. And we had to reset the pieces, go through all the moves again. And we got back to this position and everything's good. But the things just kept piling on. So my opponent played Bishop d3 here. So we're back in the game. Like this 10 minutes, it's good. But another thing about this position, or about this game, is that our aisle was so packed. Like I could barely squeeze through to get back in the aisle back to my board. And every time I had to ask our board 1, Kevin, to move out of the way, because I asked the other guy. So we have 2 players back to back playing on boards this way, and the aisle was just so small because, well, one, it was just smaller than usual than the other aisles. My opponent and the Grandmaster, that their aisle was so much bigger. They had so much space to walk around. But our aisle, I couldn't get in and out without bothering people. And it's because very, very relevant. Our board 4, James, he literally couldn't get out. He stood up to get water, and then he just sat back down. There's really nothing that can be done. We're in the middle of a game. We're in the middle of a round. There's nothing to be done. But simultaneously that with me also being super flustered was not good. I was extremely uncomfortable. Anyways, I castle. I castle. And he plays knight f3. And I decide to go knight e4. Um, uh, Sometimes people play knight ge2. So they keep the option of f3 and e4 possible later down the line. And usually whenever they play knight f3, I decide to go knight e4. And after bishop takes and queen takes, now this knight is defended, and I go rook e8. He actually decides to take. He gives up his bishop, and I have this extended e4 pawn. I have to move this f pawn to defend it. And I knew roughly, I don't think I've had this exact position. I might have, I'm not sure. But I knew this position was like definitely okay for black. Although I was a little bit concerned. Like knight e2 to knight f4 and all that stuff. Yeah, I was a little bit concerned, but I knew it was okay. He castles. I go bishop e6. He goes queen c2, and I go knight d7. So this is all pretty normal. I could, if he lets me, I might go b5 and knight b6, or I could go knight f6 and knight d5. It's all, I'm pretty sure everything is okay. He goes rook a e1, which to me, that suggests that he's going to go f3 and expand with these pawns. It's kind of interesting. And I didn't know what to think about that. There's not much I can really do. I know f3 is coming. And I decide to finish my development to move my knight to a natural square. I'm trying to think if I was thinking about anything else here. I don't think I was thinking about anything else. Like, b5 is possible. But I think the main thing I didn't like about b5 was how knight e2 came with tempo. And then let's say I guess I could play this now. Yeah, I actually didn't think about much about c5. Okay, I actually thought I had to go rook a8 and knight f5. And I just thought this was a little bit uncomfortable. Well, there's a fork being threatened here on g6. Maybe I go here, but now the queen's on the same diagonal as the king. So some potential x-rays would be possible, but maybe he can't exploit it. But so I was thinking about b5 and then moving my knight over this way. But I was like, should I really do this? Is this really a good idea? I can't go c5 now because of d5. But maybe I can. But I don't really know. I don't think I can. So I didn't want to go c5 immediately because the knight guards this d5 pawn when he pushes, if he pushes. So with c5 was definitely on my radar as a potential counter pawn break. Like if he goes f3, I can go c5, if it's potentially. And so my idea with knight f6 is that now I can go now if it's my turn again, I will play c5 because he can't push because now the d5 square is guarded by not only the bishop but by the knight as well. So that was kind of my thought process, whether it was good or bad. And let's see. He does play f3 now. He beats me to it. I don't have enough time for c5. He plays f3. And when I played knight f6, I actually went out to use a restroom and get some more water. So this is important. I got water and drank it away from the chessboard because, well, I just knocked over a whole thing of water. But once again, Kevin is thinking. My board one, he's thinking. And there's no possible way for me to get back in the aisle. I told you this was important. And so there's no way for me to get back in the aisle. Like Kevin's opponent, he's like leaning back like this, but he's like old and and last time I asked him, it's really hard for him to move. I don't want to interrupt Kevin while he's thinking. And like, actually it's the next move. No, actually no, it's f3. This move exactly, actually. So my opponent plays this move and I'm like, I have to take. That's the most logical move, because or else I'm going to lose this pawn because it has a lot of attackers. So I have to take the f pawn, but I can't get through the aisle back to my seat. Like I literally can't. Like I'm like right there. I'm trying to, but Kevin is like literally on the ground. Like he's like 6'4", so usually he kneels on the ground because when he doesn't have enough space. and he's like so squished already, and it's my move. I'm like, I'm not gonna bother Kevin. Like, I'm just gonna go. So I went on my opponent's side of the board, and I took a little bit of time, and like my opponent just keeps like glancing at me, glancing at me, glancing at me, and so is like the GM too. And I end up playing E takes F3. And I'm just gonna play the move, write it down, and I'm on my opponent's side of the board. I'm standing up on my opponent's side of the board, and I make that move, and then I'm just going to write the move down on my opponent's side of the board, just because I literally can't get to my seat. I just can't. Like, I can't. And the look, like, my opponent pauses the clock. My opponent pauses the clock, and he's like, you can't do that." And then the GM's like, "You have to sit on your side of the board. Please, you have to sit on your side of the board." I was like, okay. And like, my opponent puts back his pawn on the board and puts my pawn back, while the clock is paused. And then I'm very flustered at this point. Like, I'm extremely flustered, and yeah, so I have to ask Kevin, like, sorry Kevin, like, please can you move, and so he's still thinking on his turn, playing his first ever grandmaster in a tournament, like, ever, and like, so I'm interrupting him again, and I get it to sit down, and I do my move again, and I just remember sitting there because, like, I just cannot understate. I mean, all this is probably in my head, right? Like, I bet my opponents are probably nice people. They're probably very nice people and everything, but I just can't get it out of my head. There's like, I just remember so vividly just like sitting there and just remembering their gaze, their like disgust. Like, I felt like I wasn't even respected as a person, which makes no sense, right? Like, that's all in my head. It has to be all be in my head. But like, I just remember sitting there being like, oh my god, like, but he takes the pawn with the rook, and I play c5, and c5 is a bad move. Like, the idea, like, firstly, there's this X-ray. This rook is on the same file as this queen. There's this X-ray, and like, if white can get in e4 with this pin here, like, it gets kind of bad. Like, black should probably do queen d7, just get out of the pin, and after some trades, like, this is fine. For example, actually, this is great because the pawn's hanging. So actually, queen d7 is really great. It's a really great move because now they can't push e4. That's a great move. Why didn't I do that? Yeah, that makes sense. Or maybe even rook a e8 makes a lot of sense. c5, it does prevent e4 because if e4, I take. So I was like hyper fixating on like, okay, he's going to go e4 and this is really bad for me because of my queen and my bishop. And I'm like, and like simultaneously, I can't think straight. Like, I'm mentally frazzled. And like, so I play c5 and he plays knight b3. And I'm like, I am so bad at this. I was like, that was a horrible move. Like, c5 is not a great move at all. Because if I do take, he can do pawn takes. That's also fine. And at first, I was like, oh, I have a discovery because after I take, then if he takes my queen, I take his queen. And if he takes my bishop, I take his rook for free with a check. But the thing is, he takes my bishop with a check. And so I just lose everything. So that was a horrible move. Or that would have been a horrible move. Although even this, I technically still have queen f7. But after the pawn trade, I would lose this f5 pawn, which would not be good. And I was like calculating that for a while. I was like, no, that's so dumb. And I was like, why? Like, he doesn't have to go e4 if I play c5. He doesn't have to. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And so I'm sitting there absolutely baffled at my thought process. Like, I was absolutely baffled. I'm like, And I just remember feeling like my heart just like sank on the ground. Like I cannot do this. Like this is so bad. What is wrong with me? So I play, but I'm like, I just need to play a move. I'm just gonna play b6. And so now he still can't really go e4 because a pawn takes pawn. Um, Although he can still take. But I do pin whatever that's worth. I don't know. But I do take. I don't take. He doesn't go e4. He actually takes the pawn. And I have these doubled isolated pawns. And of course, earlier, if I don't defend the pawn is just hanging. And if I take, I didn't like the look of it because of this. Although maybe it's fine. Maybe this is also fine. I remember being very, very pessimistic in this position. But maybe it's all just fine. I do play b6, which I don't think is a good move. And then he takes, I take. And then now he plays e4. And I feel like if I do take and knight takes, this pawn is hanging. And if I take and if he takes with the queen, now this bishop is going to die. Like it's just pinned. And I'm going to lose this game. And even worse, what's even worse about this position, something like this, is that if I do take, oh, I guess it's not that bad. I thought he could take and then take this rook, but he can't do that actually because I can slide my rook back. Doesn't matter though because I'm still pinned. Although in this case I get out. Wow. Okay. So actually, if I take his rook, he has to take like this, and then I'm still in a pin. Although maybe it's still fine. Except it's in... Oh, wow. Maybe this is fine. That's wild. Huh. He actually can't exploit the pin very easily. Anyways. I thought everything was bad. Like, if I take this pawn, I thought everything was bad. So, and I thought pushing c4 was much, much better. Because now the knight is forced to move. I thought the knight might move here. And then I would go check. And I go here. And I'm going to go here. This is one thing I could do. I don't think it's actually that good for me. Is it that good for me? I was thinking... What was I thinking here? I thought this was one of the possibilities I had. For example, if he takes this pawn, then I can go check. And he would have to sacrifice his rook. Because if he doesn't, then it's smothered mate. Actually, no, it's not even smothered mate. Why did I even think that? His rook is guarding the f2 square. Gosh, all my analysis was wrong. all of it's wrong. So, anyways, I thought this would be good because at the very least I can take this pawn. At the very least. And the c4 pawn might be easier for me to hold on to. Maybe. Although it still looks pretty weak. So I thought he was going to go knight d2. But he actually surprised me by going knight d4. And now I play queen c5, putting the knight to the king, and the knight's undefended. And I actually thought knight d4, when I first saw it, I'm playing really fast, by the way. Because I'm not in a great mood, I don't trust myself, and everything's bad. And so I was playing really fast. And I remember thinking, okay, c4, he can't go here because after queen c5, and if he plays queen f7, I have this move, knight g4. So obviously he cannot play knight d4. He has to go knight d2. Obviously. But then after he played knight d4, I was like, oh my gosh. Why did I not calculate correctly? I'm so bad at this game. I did not calculate even... Why did I not calculate this correctly? Because after queen c5, queen g2... After knight g4, he just takes this bishop. And if I take his queen, he takes my queen. And he's just up a piece. He has 2 knights, I have 1 knight. And after he takes... Also, I don't really have any alternatives. I guess technically I could just move the bishop back somewhere, like bishop d7, for example. I guess he would probably take like this. This does not look very pleasant at all. Yeah, this doesn't look very pleasant at all. So I did end up playing knight g4 because after knight takes here, I have this in-between move. Threatening to get in with the queen, attacking the knight. His queen is still hanging. So he goes queen g3, and I take the knight, and he takes the pawn, and I go check. So I get out of it. I'm only down a pawn, but I am down a pawn. And one thing I really learned, that like, I was so pessimistic about this position. Like, I thought I just straight up lost the game. And I was very upset with myself. I just can't get over that. Just thinking about what my emotions, like just visualizing how I felt and what happened in that game, I still get like chills. I was not in a good mental state. Anyways, so I was very pessimistic about this position, but I guess I ended up kind of getting out of it only down a pawn. And I knew I was going to suffer for the rest of the game. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is so tough. But admittedly, it's only a pawn, and I gotta continue playing. I do come up with a really nice resource. Rook fe8. Nice. He could trade a pair of rooks, but if he does that, he can't take the knight because of back rank checkmate, of course. And of course, he can't take the knight immediately because still back rank checkmate. And he ends up playing a sort of pass move, rook ef1. So, and he's really preparing this f6 push by his play knight f6. And he has this very interesting idea, and I'm not sure if it works, but knight d5. And if I do take, he could push to f6. And it gets kind of interesting. Like, I could sacrifice the knight back and do this. And maybe play this. Maybe this is what he didn't want. And maybe that's why he didn't play it. Because I get my pawn back and I stop the attack. Maybe that's why. But it is an interesting move. Knight d5. Because if I don't sacrifice the knight back, I actually don't know how I survive. Actually, I'm going to turn on the engine just for this moment. Yep, knight takes f6 is the best move, which makes sense. I turned off the engine now. In this exact position, I mean. So he plays queen g6 first. And the idea is to get the rook to g3. So you're clearing the g3 square for your rook and getting closer with your queen. And I just play rook e7. So now my rook... So now if knight d5, it's even worse. Because after takes and push, I go rook f7. And I guard everything. Which is very, very cool. And this pawn is even pinned because of the queen, for example. So, anyways, it's not a good... Definitely not a good sacrifice now. Even if it wasn't before, it's still not. But yeah, I play rook e7. He plays rook g3. And I do come up with a trap. I come up with a trap in quotation marks. And it actually does hold the game. In this position, I play rook ae8. And he has 23 minutes left. And he spends 13 of his 23 minutes playing queen takes h6. And I play a awesome move. One of the most awesome moves that I thought of in this position. Like, you could try to prevent queen takes h6 by playing king h8. You could try that. You could definitely try that. You're not hanging anything. You're not hanging anything at all. This pawn can't be taken. But right now, he's threatening the pawn on h6, and I ignore it. Because after queen takes h6, I play the move queen f2. Mwah, beautiful. So, this move is awesome because I'm threatening the rook. I'm threatening, and if he takes me, it's back rank checkmate. I'm also threatening to take this rook, and if I do that, then I can take the queen afterwards. So I'm threatening to win a rook. And he ends up finding the defensive move, which is queen c8. But now I'm able to utilize my doubled rooks, and I play rook e8, pinning the rook to the king, and I'm attacking the queen. And of course, if you take, then I just checkmate. So you can't take me, of course. He plays rook f3, and this is crazy. It's a black queen sandwich. And I'm pretty sure the only move, queen h4, guarding the rook. I'm attacking the queen, and there's not much to do. He disconnects my queen from the defense of my rook, and I play queen g4. And in this position, there's no real alternative. If you go queen f4, for example, then what I can do, I can go takes, and after rook takes, rook e8 again. And you could go g3 now, but I think what's the move? Is it I could go here and then takes. So that would be losing for white because I just win a rook at the end. And of course, you can't go rook f4 because takes. And you can't take my queen because of checkmate. So the only defensive move is g3, disconnecting the queen from the defense of the rook. And now I don't go queen h3 because that would just hang a rook. Yeah, that just hangs a rook. So I have to go queen g4. So now if rook takes rook, now queen takes f3. And after I could take and play, maybe even play knight g4 or cash in and take one of these pawns. That's also possible. Or I could play knight g4 and get hit with some checks. Or he could try to defend somehow, like maybe knight e4 defends for him. Maybe. It gets really scary for him because knight e3. But maybe this is still holdable. I'm not sure. It doesn't look very good. Yeah, actually, this looks like it would be losing for him. So he could do a perpetual if he does that. And I thought this is what he would do. I thought he would just do this and go into this endgame up 2 pawns, but very, very tricky still. He does not do that though. He then goes, after I go queen g4, he goes queen f4 now. Now he goes queen f4. Well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is now that if I take, if I go here, he could just take. The queen's guarded by the pawn now. And my queen's not guarding the rook. And the king's not getting back rank checkmated. So he can just take. And now I'm just down a rook. So he goes queen f4 now because it's possible now with the queen not having vision on e8 anymore. And no back rank checkmate possibilities. Because the pawn has been pushed. And now I go queen h3. So this whole sequence of moves was absolutely wild. And here, he plays queen takes c4. And of course, I cannot go king h8 because he forces a trade of queens with a check. I take, he takes, and now he's just up 3 pawns. He's up 3 pawns. Well, 5 versus 2 pawns. So I have to go king f8. And he goes queen c5. I go king g8. He goes queen c4. I go king f8. He goes queen c5. I go king g8. And it's a draw. And he makes these moves with 1 minute on a clock. And he's barely making it. And I did analysis with James for an hour the night of this game. And we concluded that if white doesn't repeat moves, white loses no matter what they do. For example, if in this position, they go back to g1, knight g4 is coming in. And what move do you make? Like, literally, what move do you make? If you take the rook, I'm going to take, and now your queen is overloaded. If you take the rook, it's checkmate. Okay, well, what else do you do? If you go knight d1, now the winning move is rook 8 e2. And if you go knight f2, attacking the queen, well, actually, I think the move is rook takes. And if you take my queen, you get checkmated. This is beautiful. This is a crazy checkmate. And so there are checkmates left and right in this position. This position is absolutely winning. If you go rook f4, what other options are there? If you go queen c5, or c4, I mean, let's say queen c4 in this position. So it's white to move now. Let's say you go rook f4 to prevent knight g4, but except knight g4 anyways, and you can't take because of checkmate. So knight g4 is unpreventable, and black is just winning if white doesn't repeat moves. That's the conclusion James and I came to, and yeah, it's a draw. This position was a draw, and I couldn't believe it. Like, I went through so much emotion in this game, from the opening, from the water spilling on move 8 to then getting, we say, yelled at. Me and my teammates, like, oh, you got yelled at by a GM. I did not get yelled at, but he definitely wasn't happy with me. He definitely wasn't happy with me. More like annoyed and frustrated by me and how stupid I am. Especially around f3. They probably just thought I was the biggest dummy on the planet, which sometimes I am, to be honest. And to getting a bad position, c5, I don't like it. Maybe it's not actually that bad, but after knight b3, like, what am I going to do? Play c4 and allow this? That just looks bad. That just looks bad. So I went through a lot of emotions, and yeah, I went to c5 or c4, I mean, c5 to c4, and I barely, I blundered that pawn, but I managed to create enough counterplay. Here, rook f1, it already feels like queen g6, like, now he let me back in. I mean, this position is hard to play, admittedly. I'm not sure what he should have done differently, but it allowed me enough time to create enough counterplay and get my queen in. And he was low enough on time that it really worked out for me. Just barely. You could say it worked out for me or not worked out for me. Maybe I was better. I just couldn't find the win. We're going to check with the engine very, very soon. But yeah, it was a draw at the end of the day, and one of the craziest turns of events in a while. And yeah, I remain undefeated with after this fourth round with 3.5 out of 4, just barely. And this was definitely one of my most dramatic games. Okay, I have to give my reaction to that game review. What in the world happened? So in this position, wow. Queen f2 is a miss because knight e4 is better. Knight e4. Wow. Because if queen takes, then knight takes g3. I was so tunnel visioned. I was so tunnel visioned about queen f2. I totally missed knight e4. I can't believe I missed that. And this is okay. Rook takes f1 was best. Rook takes, queen takes, and queen takes b2. Okay, I thought about this. I did think about it, but I just thought queen h4 is better. And after g3, queen d2 is better. Oh my gosh. Rook 8 e3 is the best move. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Rook 8 e3 being the best move is ridiculous. That's crazy. Okay. Okay, but wow. I don't even know how to react to that. Queen d2, rook 8 e3. If he takes, then he loses. But it's still bad for me because I take and he takes and takes rook f5. I get one of my pawns back, but I'm still down a pawn. Wow. I honestly can't believe it. That's wild. Okay. And yeah, rook takes f1 was better. g3, queen g4. Yeah, queen takes c1 or rook takes c1 was better because rook takes, queen takes, and then rook takes, knight e4. Oh, and then if he takes, then rook takes, and I'm going to win these weak pawns. Okay. This makes sense. And that's about equal. Wow. But instead, I go here. And rook takes e1 was a better move. Because the king just goes here, and it likes this endgame for black, or for white, I mean. But it's still very, very, very tough to win. Oh, queen e3. Interesting. Wow. Okay. But he messes up with queen f4. But now I go queen h3. And now it is a draw. Because if he doesn't repeat moves, unless he goes queen f2, now knight g4, and it's only slightly worse for black. Yeah, I actually calculated queen g2. Rook takes, queen takes, king takes, and I get a fork at the end. But I am down 2 pawns for the exchange, so it's just a complicated endgame, but I should be winning eventually. Wow, this is one of the... That's crazy, though. Anyways, wow. Cool, that's a really cool game review. I can't believe it's equal. This position, I was completely in my head. I was completely in my head about this position. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. That's crazy. C5 is a good move. It's not bad. I was all in my head. Wow. Okay. See you guys in the next one.